everybody, John here, and on to the garage today. This is a fault breakage, whatever you want to call it, that you do find on a few XK8s. Access to the back isn't brilliant. It's never going to be. It's a 2+2, but when you do get somebody in the back, tends to be kiddies. Maybe they don't take as much care, and this plastic trim, when you're coming back out, is really quite exposed at the bottom, and you clip it with your foot and the trim breaks. And I've repaired it a couple of times with some basically impact adhesive, just to keep it in one piece. And ideally it wants replacing, but we're going to try out some plastic welding techniques. So I'm going to get this off. That's my dodgy repairs from a previous time. Okay, so first task is to split this and clean it up. Okay, so clean those up best as I can. Top tip is not really to use glue on in the first place and do things properly. Whenever you're going to work on trim panels, you've got generally codes on them. And as I'm about to do some plastic welding with this, I'm quite likely to damage or obscure them. So it's a really good idea to note those codes down somewhere that you're not going to be touching. Okay, now I'm going to show you various techniques on this, and all of these are going to give a really good robust repair that is probably as good as new from strength point of view. Not all of them are going to give the cosmetic perfection. This one should be cosmetically perfect. So this is what should have happened in the first place. You get a crack in your plastic, and hopefully it's still attached somewhere, which means it's very tight on the other side. So tight that actually when you take the grain into account, it's actually really difficult to see where it's cracked. Hopefully you guys can see that. So we're going to do a proper repair on that using a soldering iron. And my soldering iron is this thing. It's 25 watt, so it's not a powerful soldering iron. And as long as you've got the right sort of plastic, and almost all the stuff that you're going to find in a car interior is the right sort of plastic, then we can find our crack. Let's put it somewhere in the middle of your image. We can find our crack and use a soldering iron to smear the plastic on the back. And as you do that, and you're not going very deeply, I'm probably going about not quite 1 millimeter, I think. As you're doing that, it's resetting and joining what you've just done. So quite quickly that's cold. I drag the plastic across basically from the top of the crack to the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is push some plastic into the join from a little bit further away. So I've got a little bit of a raised ridge. I'm going to come from the other way, doing the same. Take your time, don't press too hard, you go straight for the plastic very easily. I'm trying not to get too close to the edge because I'm going to be joining it. And I've got that rather neat repair, obviously very visible, but that's okay because this is the back. that is now the thickest part of the panel. It's cooled down more or less straight away. Other side, so if I just find a indicator for you, the crack is by my thumb. It's not all the way through anymore because I've got that. Next, we're going to do the joining. And again, if you've not messed around and glued it, this is going to go together a lot better than this is. This has been broken for quite some time. And flip him over. First of all, I'm looking for anything that I can use to just stitch them together like you've just seen very quickly, just to hold it basically as my tape. And I'm looking at this here. I've got this nice strong boss, and I'm going to just do what I did previously in this one area. A little bit of stitching. So smear the plastic from one piece to the other piece. Then try and take some plastic from here and smear it in to the other piece. And all I'm after at this stage is just something to hold it. Moment of truth. Let go. We're attached. So I've messed around with this far too much previously. I've got bits missing and chips and glue. So this is not ideal. Now I'm just going to try to smear these two together. Okay, not looking for a huge amount of strength. Just looking for not having to hold it. So, yeah, is caught. One of my options is to do the stitch like I've got here, all the way along here, and that will work just fine. I want to make this a little stronger, so I'm going to try out a couple of other techniques, and it's a bit of variety to show you guys. I've got a piece of, this is MIG welding wire. It's just the stiffest cheap wire I've got knocking around. Just going to cut 1 inch of that off. Then what I'm going to do, get my pliers, and I'm going to turn him round, and I want to make like a little S. Flatten him out. A really good idea is make yourself these little shapes and use them to steel reinforce your plastic. And the way you go about that is don't heat the plastic, because touching the plastic at this stage, it's going to melt really easily, really quickly, and I don't want that. I want to heat the steel. Let's make sure it bridges. There we go. Heat the steel and let the steel heat the plastic. To be fair, this is easier with a slightly more powerful soldering iron. For a low power one, this is ideal for general plastic stitching because you do less damage, less unintentional stuff. And when I feel I've reached a point where the top of the wire is almost flush with my plastic, I'm just going to do the stitching technique again, smearing the plastic across the top of it. The risk in this, I say, is just it going through and making an impression on the outside. So that's why you want your thin wire, Lots of patience, and away you go. But this will make a really, really strong joint. Right, that is well and truly embedded. It's a really good idea to wear a mask while you're doing this. I'm in a very well ventilated area and you wouldn't be able to hear me with my mask on. So, being a little bit naughty. So again, as I'm smearing, trying not to go too deep. It's only this side where I want to distort the plastic. The other side I want to keep as it was. And there we are on that. That's buried that S piece of wire in the plastic, and because of its shape it can't pull out, so when this is stretched it's not going to pull apart. I'm going to use some aluminium mesh. This is the sort of thing that you use for car body repairs. You can get it in stainless steel, aluminium, etc. All will work. All that matters is it's nice and thin. Stainless is obviously a lot stiffer, would be better for this application, but I've only got some aluminium in stock. So what I'm going to do is use this to try and repair the area around this boss and up towards this lip, just to show you how that's done. And this is literally cut with a pair of scissors. Not in the slightest bit difficult. In fact, it's easier than cutting cardboard. So I'm going to position this in that gap there. It's really nice and moldable stuff. So I'm just going to shape it. And what we do is basically the same technique as with the piece of metal S bend. Heat the metal, don't heat the plastic. Let's do a little bit over here just because it's going to be easier to pick up on camera. So bring that down into contact, let it heat up, and almost straight away we're getting it to engage with the plastic, sinking it in. Again, I've got to say, a flat tip on your screwdriver, on your soldering iron would be an advantage, but you can literally do it with anything, as you can see here. And that's going in nicely. And if you touch wherever the mesh crosses, you've only really got to hold it for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, and it starts to embed nicely into the plastic. So I've been wearing a mask like this one whilst doing this. It's not particularly smelly or gassy experience, but safety first. You never know what sorts of things have been put in the plastic. basically, this is like a big sticking plaster, but it's made of the same material as the cover, so it's going to be quite effective. I've got a little bit of metal still showing, so I'll probably go over it again. With all these techniques I've been sharing with you on this so far, I've not been going very deep, and that's because I've been trying to preserve the grain on the outside of the panel. If you were doing something more structural or hidden, then obviously you could be a lot more aggressive with your techniques, stitching the plastic just on its own. You could go right through and leave marks and then just sand it off and paint it up and it'd be great. In areas like around this boss, you might want to actually build it up a little bit. And so you want some material to add in, like as in standard welding. And one way of doing that is taking a craft knife and trimming a little bit off the edge of your trim piece, which is a great idea if you want the right colour and everything else, but quite often not possible because you're destroying the thing that you're trying to repair. So another approach is to use other plastics that are similar. And luckily there are various plastics generally lying around in your garage which are very similar to the material you're welding. One of them is, get the camera in place, this stuff. This is strimmer wire or trimming wire, or some of your lawnmowers might even have it as their blade. You don't want the stuff that's got a fiberglass strand of wire in it, obviously. But far more similar to the plastic we got here is cable ties. And most of us have got plenty of these hanging around, potentially even in colours, because you tend to pull off or cut off the tails. So we can use that as a filler. When you are using it as a filler, you probably are going to generate a lot more gas. So again, the little mask is a good idea. Hence the noise. Darth Vader. There we go. Okay, so I finished it off with the first technique, the plastic stitch. Not pretty, but strong enough to make this a robust part that I can now stick back on my part, knowing that it's not going to fall apart. It does have to be thermoplastic that you're using when you're doing this technique, so a plastic that will melt and can be reformed time and time again. Plastics fall into two categories: thermoplastics, like I've just described, and thermosets. And thermosets can be moulded once, and then if you try to do it again by heating up, they will essentially char or burn. They tend to be the stiffer plastics. Interior trim does tend to be fine. Under the bonnet you might find some of the plastics are thermosets, because obviously we don't want them to reshape because they got warm. Other clues you might find, go on here, ABS is a good sign, because ABS is one of the plastics which is a thermoplastic. Probably the most common thing used on the interiors of cars, unless you get the really soft like dashboard materials. Also not on here, but if you see 3 arrows making a triangle, the recycling symbol, certainly in Europe, I can't say what that's like in the States or the rest of the world, but in Europe, 3 arrows making up a triangle means recyclable, which typically means it's a thermoplastic, because obviously this stuff can be chopped up into little chips and turned into something else. So I've now got my rock solid, basically one piece of plastic rather than the 2 pieces I had glued together before. I'm going to make do with this for a little while, because as I said, the parts are quite expensive, and I'm just going to wait till I see something at the right price. So I'm going to just improve my thin crack, which I don't want to weld because I don't want to ruin the finish on it completely. So I'm going to do a little bit of a quick fix, and how I'm going to do that is I'm going to use some multi-purpose polyfiller. And here I've got the finer version, polyfiller fine surface, extra fine filler for hairline cracks and wood grain, glass smooth finish. Now, why the hell am I using this stuff? It's cheap, it's readily available, and the finish is matte and absorbent, and that's going to suit my purposes in terms of trying to make this blend in. If I use a plastic filler, I'm going to have to spray the whole thing because there's going to be a very obvious line. So, using a little bit of polyfiller, I know a lot of you are going to be cringing at this stage. Don't worry about it, it's only me. Polyfiller, and I'm going to work it into the crack. I'm just trying to get, forcing it in to the deep part of the crack, getting in between the two pieces of plastic. I'm obviously filling up the grain a little bit as I'm doing so, which again, big advantage of this stuff is it's water soluble. I can just wipe it off with a damp cloth. Way less than perfect, but we are talking about one piece of plastic now. So, wish I'd never glued it. I could have got this right perfect. Look at that. So we finished putting some filler on this. We've got it all stitched together. And as I said previously, I used polyfiller, which is not a traditional choice for car stuff, but it has an advantage, which is I could wash it off of the grain, and also it's absorbent. And the reason is I'm going to use this. You can see that it's Leather Forever Colour Restorer. I got this for the seats in the Jag. It's an ivory stained conditioner, and basically it adds a little bit of colour at the same time as it conditions the seat. And the advantage of using the polyfiller stuff is it's porous and absorbent, so when I put this on, it's going to take on some of the colour and stain it, and I'm not going to have to spray the whole thing as I would have done if I put plastic filler, which had been a completely different colour, onto this panel. What I'll do, I'll just do the bottom half, and this stuff builds up, so you sort of apply it, let it dry off for a little while, buff it off, and then you can put another coat on, and it keeps altering the colour very slowly. So just do that, and then I'll finish this off in the background, show you the finished effect, but hopefully that shows up on screen. That's gonna more or less disappear. And no, it's not perfect, but it is really strong. It's not going to break like the glue would, and it saved me about £60.